Okay, so today, MSM3, we are going to talk about adding and subtracting fractions that include negatives. So we introduced adding and subtracting negative numbers. Now we're going to expand into adding and subtracting fractions that include negatives. So what are the rules? What are the important things? First is it has to have a common denominator. You cannot add and subtract unless you have a common denominator. So the common denominator in a problem has to be two of the same value. Now, right now in our first problem, 2/3 plus -1/9, I do not have the same denominator. The 3 and the 9 in the bottom, not the same number. So in order to do this, I first have to come up with what is the least common denominator. So least common denominator in this case is 9. So when we think about our list of multiples, 3, 6, 9, 12, the lowest denominator that they have in common is 9. Now I'm going to get 2/3 to become something with a ninth in the denominator. In order to do that, I have to multiply because we're getting a multiple. So I would do 3 times 3 is 9. That tells me I have to do the same thing in the numerator. 2 times 3 is 6, making 6/9 the replacement. 2/3 is worth the same as 6/9. So I would say, okay, my new problem is 6/9 plus, and I'm going to have -1/9. Now that I have a common denominator, the entire rest of the problem is in the numerators. I don't have to worry about the denominators anymore now that they are the same. So I am going to compare, or not compare, but add together the 6 and the -1/9. So 6 plus -1 is going to be 6, take away 1, or 5/9. And that would be it. That's the whole process. I can do this for every single problem. First thing I need is a common denominator. So the common denominator of 12 and 6, the lowest multiple they have in common is 12. 11 and 8. A lot of people will multiply them and say, like 11 times 8 is 88. Always try to check halfway and say, well, would 44 work? 8 doesn't go into 44, so no. Least common denominator, 88. 9 and 12. It's not 9 times 12 because there's a lower one. If we think of multiples of 12, 24, 36. And I know that 9 goes into 36, so the least common denominator would be 36. So when I get those fractions so that they have that common denominator, I would have -7/12, doesn't need to change, plus 10/12. And then I'm going to look at the numerator only because now I have matching common denominators. -7 plus 10, I've got more positives than negatives, 3/12, which in lowest terms is 1/4. Always want to get to the point where you have a final answer in lowest terms. First one, 5/9, was already in lowest terms. -8/11, if I multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 8, I get -64/88. Take away 7/8, which would be 77/88. This one I had to multiply by 11. So now I've got -64 minus 77. If it is subtraction, remember we always change it to addition. So I can change this to plus a -77. So what am I really doing? I'm adding -64 and -77 for a -141/88. And that would be my final answer. Last case scenario here is the minus and negative. Remember we talked about that before, having to change subtraction to addition. So I get my common denominator, 36. So on the first one, I'm going to multiply by 4, and I'm going to get 8/36. Instead of minus and negative, I'm going to change it to plus a positive. And 7/12, I'm going to multiply those by 3, and that's going to become 21/36. I only have to add or subtract my numerators. So the 8 and the 21 makes 29/36. Last but not least, we have the mixed numbers. So 6 and 1/4 plus -1 and 11/12. I have to start by saying, well, what do I get if I just combine the whole number? So what if I do 6 plus -1? That's 5. Just sort of set that off to the side. Now I'm going to do the 1/4 plus the -11/12. And here's where I'm going to get the common denominator. The least common denominator for 4 and 12 is 12. So that 1/4, I'm going to do times 3 times 3. And I'm going to get 3/12. plus negative 11/12. And I'm going to combine the numerators now that the denominators are the same. And I'm going to say, well, I've got more negatives than positives, and that is negative 8/12. However, not lowest terms, negative 2/3. Now, you're going to say like, oh, I'm done. You're so close to done. The problem is here, I've got a whole number answer and I've got a fraction answer, and I have to combine those. 5 and negative 2/3, which is also going to be read the same as 5 take away 2/3. So 5 take away 2/3 would leave me with 4 and 1/3 as a final answer when I combine those two partial answers. Now, this is going to be different. Your parents are probably used to changing everything to improper fractions. That works as well. This actually has much smaller numbers. You'll notice the biggest number that I have to work with is a 12, which is fantastic. I don't have to work with huge numbers if I use this method. If your parents are trying to help you and they're using improper fractions, it does work, but you end up having to use larger numbers, and you usually end up having to rely on a calculator to help you with some of the computations. You'll notice I didn't need a calculator because I had small numbers to work with. So 1 and 7/8 take away 3 and 5/12. I'm first going to say, well, what's the common denominator? So least common denominator of 8 and 12 is 24. If you thought it was 48, that will work. However, at the very end, you're going to need to do more simplifying than I will. So 1 and 7/8, I'm going to do the 1 take away 3. So over here on the side, 1 and negative 3 is negative 2. And I'm just kind of put a pin in that for a moment. Over here, I'm going to have to do the 7/8 take away 5/12. Here's where I get the common denominator of 24. I'm going to do times 3 on both the numerator and denominator, 21/24, plus do times 2. So it's a negative 10/24. I started to write the 5. I almost didn't change it. And now I can combine the 21 and the negative 10. 21 and negative 10, which gives me 11/24. And again, you're not quite done because you've got to combine this negative 2 with this 11/24. And because one is positive and one is negative, you can treat it like subtraction. What if I did 2 take away 11/24? Well, the rest that I would have left is the other 13/24. So it would be negative 1 and 13/24. Now, if you're stumbling on that, if you need to, you can rewrite that negative 2 as negative 48/24, right? 48 is double 24, so this is worth negative 2 plus 11/24. And then you would be able to do the same idea, and it would be negative 37/24, which would still land you at negative 1 and 13/24 as a final answer. Whether you can do it in your head or whether you need to write it out, they both work. Last but not least, I'm just going to rewrite these two at the bottom and not do all of the steps out. Negative 2 and 1/7 plus, and I'm going to switch this, right, to a negative 5 and 1/2. Because I'm adding two negatives, it's going to add just as if they were two positives. I've got the negative 2 and the negative 5 makes negative 7. I've also got to combine the 1/7 and the 1/2, negative 2/14 and negative 7/14. I changed the 17 to a 14 by doubling both the numerator and denominator. I changed the 2 to a 14 by multiplying both by 7. Got negative 9/14. And because they're both negative, all I have to do is stick them together. So that's a little bit easier when they are the same sign. This one, negative 493.5 minus a negative, I'm going to change to plus a positive, 341 and 5/8. And here's a problem where your parents' possible method of changing to an improper fraction would result in absolutely ridiculously huge numbers. I'm going to add the negative 493 with the 341 and get negative 152, more negatives than positives. Put a pin in that for a second. 1/2 is the same as 4/8 plus 5/8. Now, don't forget, the 4/8 came from a negative number. So the 4/8 is negative because the first number was all negative. And that is 1/8. And I've got a negative with a positive. I'm going to treat it like subtraction. So 152, The difference with 1/8 would leave me with negative 151 and 7/8, and I would be done. So lots of examples. If you come up with any tonight, you have a variety of ones that you can go back and compare with. Thanks.